The Unfathomable Universe in a Teacup, a documentary on bonsai. Hook. The tree is older than your great-grandparents. It fits on a coffee table. And it is entirely, deliberately, a lie. Look closely. What you see is not a dwarf tree. It is not a sapling frozen in time. What you are witnessing is a monumental, ancient drama compressed into a ceramic container, a living sculpture that defies logic and scale. This is bonsai. For the American mind, conditioned to think in terms of vastness, the endless plains, the towering redwoods, the sheer scale of the Grand Canyon, the concept of bonsai, the tree in a tray, can seem almost impossibly small, a delicate curiosity. But to understand bonsai is to understand that the greatest power can be held in the smallest form, that the infinite complexity of nature can be captured and tamed not with brute force, but with patience, artistry, and profound respect. This is not gardening. It is a collaborative, centuries-long conversation between human and nature, an art form that speaks directly to the soul of permanence and fleeting beauty. The Blossom of Chapter, the genesis of the miniature world. The history of bonsai is not a linear tale, but a meandering river that begins not in Japan, as many in the West assume, but in the heart of ancient China. Its true ancestor is Penjing, or Bonsai in earlier forms, the art of creating miniature landscapes in containers. As far back as the Han Dynasty, 206 BC to AD 220, Chinese cultures were exploring the concept of capturing vast scenic views, mountains, rivers, and forests, using rocks, soil, and living plants on a tray. The spiritual motivation was key. These early Bonsai or Penjing were seen as possessing magical power. Owning a miniature version of a landscape was believed to give the owner control over the real landscape it represented. The trees were often gnarled, twisted, and sparse, representing the rugged, magical beauty of high mountains and remote, inaccessible places, places where spirits were thought to dwell. These were not just decorations, they were spiritual talismans, powerful symbols of eternity and the universe's essence. The art traveled to Japan sometime between the 6th and 12th centuries, carried by Buddhist monks and imperial embassy personnel returning from mainland China. In Japan, the practice encountered a culture with a deeply ingrained reverence for nature and a philosophical aesthetic shaped by Zen Buddhism. This is the crucible where Penjing evolved into the art we recognize today as bonsai, bon meaning tray and sai meaning planting or to plant. The Zen influence, from landscape to single tree. The Japanese refined the Chinese concept, applying the principles of Zen philosophy, simplicity, asymmetry, and the beauty of the aged and weathered, known as Wabi-Sabi. Where Chinese Penjing often focused on recreating entire elaborate landscapes, Japanese bonsai gradually shifted its focus to the single tree. The goal became less about representing a mountain range and more about distilling the spirit and majesty of a single ancient windswept tree. This reduction, this intense focus, is where the profound power of bonsai lies. By the 14th century, references to hachi no ki, the bowls tree, were common. By the Edo period, 17th to 19th centuries, the cultivation of potted, shaped trees was popular, and eventually the term bonsai was formally adopted in the early 19th century. The art form was no longer restricted to the elite, but became a national hobby and a sophisticated aesthetic pursuit, a practice that taught patience and the appreciation of slow, deliberate change. The Blossom of Chapter 2, The Art and the Deception. To the uninitiated, a bonsai tree appears to be a genetic oddity, a perpetual juvenile. This is the grand deception at the heart of the art. Bonsai trees are not genetically dwarfed. They are regular, full-size tree species, pines, maples, junipers, elms, and more, that are kept miniature through a precise, rigorous regimen of horticultural techniques. These techniques are what elevate bonsai from gardening to a living sculptural art form. The toolkit of the master. Root pruning. This is the most critical technique. A tree's size is intrinsically linked to its root system. By judiciously trimming a large portion of the roots during repotting, often every 1 to 5 years, the artist restricts the tree's ability to absorb water and nutrients, thus limiting the growth of the canopy. The tree is constantly reminded that its environment is finite. Trunk and branch pruning. Strategic pruning is used to create the desired shape and proportion. Removing larger branches and continuously pruning new growth forces the energy into creating smaller, more compact foliage, which is essential for maintaining the illusion of scale. Wiring. This is the sculptor's essential tool. Copper or aluminum wire is carefully wrapped around the branches and trunk, allowing the artist to bend and reposition them. The wire stays on just long enough, months, sometimes over a year, for the branch to set in its new, aesthetically pleasing position, mimicking the effects of wind, gravity, or harsh environments in nature. Defoliation. In some deciduous species, a master will remove all the leaves mid-season. This shocks the tree, forcing it to produce a new set of leaves, which are typically much smaller, further enhancing the miniature effect. Soil and container. The soil is a carefully mixed, fast-draining, non-organic material, like volcanic rock, baked clay, or pumice, that retains little moisture, controlling the tree's vigor. The shallow, handcrafted ceramic container is not merely a pot. It is an integral part of the composition, chosen to complement the tree's form and color, framing the masterpiece like a museum pedestal. The styles, nature's grammar. The goal of bonsai is not just to make a small tree, but to make a small tree look like a majestic, ancient tree in nature. The artists follow several classic styles, which are nature's own grammar. Formal upright, chokan, a straight, tapering trunk reflecting a tree growing in ideal conditions. Informal upright, moyogi, the trunk curves in an S shape, the most common style, reflecting a tree that has survived in nature with some challenges. Slanting, shakan, the trunk leans sharply, suggesting a tree buffeted by a prevailing wind or growing on a steep bank. Cascade, kengai, the trunk and branches fall below the base of the container, simulating a tree growing on a cliff face. Literati, bunjingi, a tall, slender trunk with sparse foliage clustered at the top, a simple, elegant style favored by Chinese scholars, the bunjin, suggesting a tree struggling to reach the light. Each style is a narrative, a story of struggle, survival, and adaptation, told silently in wood and leaf. The blossom of Chapter 3, Bonsai Comes to America. Bonsai's journey to the West was a slow burn, punctuated by key historical moments that brought the mysterious art form across the Pacific. The first major exposure was at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. Japanese exhibits included bonsai, fascinating Western visitors, but remaining largely an exotic curiosity. It wasn't until after World War II that the art truly began to take root in the American soil. U.S. soldiers returning from the occupation of Japan brought back more than memories. Many carried small potted trees. These living souvenirs sparked a deeper interest. But the true foundation of American bonsai was laid by Japanese Americans, particularly those who, even while interned during the war, found ways to practice the art, nurturing their small trees as a vital connection to home and tradition. The American Masters and the National Collection. The most influential figure in popularizing bonsai in the United States is arguably John Yoshio Naka, 1914 to 2004. Born in Colorado, Naka dedicated his life to teaching and innovating the art. He traveled tirelessly, wrote seminal books, and taught thousands of students in English, making the once esoteric Japanese art accessible to a wide, diverse American audience. Naka's most famous masterpiece, Goshin, Protector of the Spirit, is a monumental forest planting of 11 Foemina junipers, each tree representing one of his grandchildren. It's an iconic piece, a testament to family legacy and the power of a forest composition. Goshin now resides at the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum in the U.S. National Arboretum in Washington, D.C., the official home of the National Collection. The National Bonsai and Penjing Museum itself is a powerful symbol of international diplomacy and American dedication to the art. The Japanese government gifted 53 magnificent bonsai trees to the U.S. in 1976 for the bicentennial. This collection, including a majestic 400-year-old Japanese white pine, formed the core of the museum and remains a point of pride and study for American enthusiasts. The American aesthetic, a new frontier. Modern American bonsai is not merely a mirror of Japanese tradition. It is evolving into its own unique, distinctly North American art form. Artists like Ryan Neal of Bonsai Mirai in Oregon are pioneering this new aesthetic. Neal, who apprenticed for 6 years under the legendary Japanese master Masahiko Kimura, has returned to the U.S. with a mission to adapt the art to the spectacular, rugged, and diverse flora of the North American continent.